Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're trying something a bit different. We want to cut through, the sheer volume of economic history and really pull out the core ideas from Chapter 1 of our source material, The Origins of Economy.
Right. We're not just listing dates here.
No, definitely not. We're looking for a pattern. Why do these grand economic theories, these systems that often start with really high ideals, why do they seem to, unravel when they meet actual human beings?
That's really the heart of the book's argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's why looking back is so important here. The author points out that our modern systems, capitalism, socialism, communism, you name it, they all launched with these genuinely noble goals.
Visions of fairness or efficiency.
Exactly. High ideals. But what happened in practice? Pretty consistently, we ended up with inequality, exploitation, and, as the book puts it, deep dissatisfaction.
I find that really compelling because it tackles that old excuse head on. The theory was fine, people just messed it up. This suggests maybe the thinking was backward all along. You can't design a perfect system if the materials us humans aren't perfect or predictable.
That's the key distinction. Physical laws, mostly predictable, but human behavior. That introduces what the source calls chaos. We're talking emotions, ambitions, fear, power struggles, all that messy stuff.
So the systems don't fail despite us, they fail because they don't really account for us.
Precisely. They often ignore the complexities of human nature. And that's why Chapter 1 is so foundational. It walks us through how humans first tried organizing trade and how those early attempts were maybe disconnected from reality right from the start.
Okay, so let's begin at, the beginning. Before big theories, just basic exchange, the barter system.
Right, the absolute basics.
It sounds so simple. I have extra apples, you have extra bread, let's swap. But Adam Smith pointed out a problem way back, didn't he? This double coincidence of wants. What does that actually mean day to day?
Well, it's just incredibly inefficient. Think about it. I've got grain. I want your sheep. That only works if you happen to want my grain right now.
Right. What if I want pottery instead?
Exactly. The whole exchange breaks down.
Yeah.
You need more than just willingness. You need luck for your wants to align perfectly. It creates so much friction.
So how did people get around that? What was the first big fix?
The first real innovation was commodity money, something everyone agreed had value in itself.
Okay, so not just trading goods for goods, but trading goods for what? Like livestock, grain, maybe shells.
Yes, exactly those kinds of things. Things with intrinsic value. And it wasn't just simple swapping either. It got sophisticated surprisingly quickly.
Really? How so?
Take Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE. Grain wasn't just food. It was a unit of account, a medium of exchange.
How do you know that?
We found these clay tablets, detailed written records documenting trades between merchants, farmers, even the state itself. Complex stuff.
Wow, clay tablets, that's quite a leap from just swapping chickens. But doesn't having a central commodity like grain lead to, centralized power?
It often did. It makes sense, right? Yeah. Managing large stores of grain, for instance, requires organization. So temples and palaces often became key players. They managed resources, redistributed wealth, tried to maintain some economic stability.
Trying to smooth out the bumps, control the risk.
Kind of. Control the commodity, control the economy, especially when things got uncertain, like during a famine. It was a way to manage that inherent risk.
And ancient Egypt took that state control even further, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Egypt had a very heavily state-controlled economy. Everything revolved around the pharaoh.
So taxes weren't in money, but in goods.
Right. Paid in grain, livestock. Think about the pyramids, massive public works built by labor that was paid directly with food and other necessities, not wages as we know them.
A very top-down system, tied survival directly to the state.
It was designed for stability in that specific kind of hierarchical society. Loyalty meant survival.
But okay, moving around huge amounts of grain or cattle must have limits, especially for bigger trade networks. How did we get beyond that? Make value more portable?
Well, the next major breakthrough was coinage, largely thanks to the Greeks.
Silver and gold coins.
Exactly. That was revolutionary. Suddenly you have something portable, divisible, and with a pretty consistent value. It made trade, both local and international, much, much easier.
It feels like that would just blow the doors open for merchants, right? No longer tied to bulky goods.
It definitely scaled things up. But you need more than just currency for large-scale, long-distance trade to really work smoothly. You need trust, predictability.
Which is where Rome comes in. Not just the roads, but the rules.
Precisely. The Roman legal system was a huge piece of the puzzle. Their laws around property and contracts were incredibly detailed for the time.
So that reduced the risk of getting cheated by some stranger miles away.
Essentially, yes.
Huh?
It provided a framework, a way to enforce agreements and protect investments. It helped manage the risk inherent in dealing with, well, other humans and their self-interest.
And that legal stability allowed for other financial tools to develop.
It did. You start seeing early forms of banking, places where wealthy people could deposit funds, maybe borrow money. It allowed for capital to accumulate and be deployed for bigger projects.
Yeah.
Another step away from just subsistence.
Okay, so we have coins, laws, even early banking. Sounds like progress. But the book points out a major flaw, a sort of dark side to these ancient economies.
A huge one. They were fundamentally dependent on slavery.
Mm.
Particularly in Rome, vast amounts of the actual production, the agriculture, the building, it was all underpinned by enslaved labor.
So efficiency and scale, but built on exploitation.
Absolutely. And that connects right back to the book's core argument about systems ignoring human reality, or in this case, morality. That reliance on forced labor is a critical weakness.
Moral weakness, but also maybe an economic one eventually.
Yes. The drive for power and inefficiency, those unpredictable forces, led them down that path. But building an economy on such widespread exploitation, it's inherently unstable. It contributed to why these ancient systems eventually declined. You just can't sustain that indefinitely.
Right. So after Rome's decline, trade didn't just vanish, did it? How did things reorganize?
No, it fragmented but continued. It actually became more formalized in some ways, more specialized. Cities like Athens, Carthage, later Venice and Genoa, they became hubs.
Moving luxury goods.
Yeah, things like silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa, traveling along these really complex trade routes.
Like the Silk Road.
The most famous example, yes. This intricate web of long-distance trade. And it created a new kind of power player.
Ooh.
The merchant class. This is really important. These merchants weren't lords, they weren't state officials. They operated outside those traditional hierarchies.
Making their own wealth through trade, taking risks.
Exactly. Driven by ambition, by profit. It was a major shift, introducing a path to wealth and influence that wasn't just based on land ownership or birthright. It started to disrupt the old order.
And that energy fueled things like the medieval trade fairs.
Definitely. Places like Champagne in France became massive centers for commerce. But they were more than just markets. They were like financial laboratories.
How so? What came out of them?
Well, think about it. Merchants from all over Europe, dealing in different currencies, needing to make large payments without carrying tons of gold. They needed solutions.
Ah, so this is where things like credit come in.
Precisely. Credit and foreign exchange systems were developed right there at those fairs. Ways to transfer value, manage currency risk. And alongside that, you see banking expanding, especially in Italy. These were the building blocks for modern finance.
But while all this merchant activity is bubbling up, most of Europe is still living under a very different system, right? Feudalism.
Yes, absolutely. In the countryside, the dominant structure after Rome was feudal. Land ownership was the source of wealth and power.
Lords, peasants, castles.
Right, a rigid hierarchy. Peasants worked the land, lords offered protection. It was primarily agrarian, very localized.
It sounds stable in a way, but the book argues it was fundamentally inefficient, unsustainable.
It provided a kind of local stability, sure. But economically, it was stagnant, very inefficient, because everything was tied to land, and there was little room for social mobility or, frankly, innovation for most people. Ambition was suppressed.
It couldn't really adapt or grow, especially with the towns and merchants creating new wealth.
Exactly. It eventually couldn't cope. And that inefficiency, that rigidity, helped pave the way for the next big economic idea emerging around the 16th century. Mercantilism.
Okay, mercantilism. This lines up with nations forming, exploring, colonizing.
Yes, the rise of the nation-state is key here. Mercantilism was really the economic philosophy of competing nations.
And the core idea was that wealth is limited, like a fixed pie.
That's the fundamental belief. Wealth, usually measured in gold and silver, was seen as finite. If the pie is fixed, then for my nation to get a bigger slice, your nation has to get a smaller one.
A zero-sum game.
Pretty much, which naturally leads to intense competition between nations.
So how did states try to win this game? What did mercantilist policy actually look like?
The state became central, heavily involved in managing the economy. The goal was always a favorable balance of trade, export as much as possible, import as little as possible, to hoard that gold and silver.
Lots of regulation, tariffs.
Oh, yes. And crucially, governments granted monopolies to powerful trading companies, like the East India companies, giving them exclusive rights to trade in certain regions or certain goods. It was about controlling resources and markets for national gain.
Concentrating power and wealth again, but now at the national level, driven by that same competitive instinct.
Exactly. It institutionalized national competition. So looking back at this whole sweep in Chapter 1, you see this clear line, don't you? From simple barter, trying to overcome basic inefficiencies.
To commodity money, coinage, laws, banking, all innovations trying to make exchange work better.
Leading eventually to these highly centralized, state-controlled systems like mercantilism. But the point the book makes is that despite all the innovation, none of these systems really achieved lasting stability or equity for everyone.
They kept running into problems often stemming from human nature, ambition, fear, the drive for power, the tendency towards inequality.
Right. Which brings us back to where we started, the quote that haunts the book. The systems we live under all began with high ideals, yet in practice they have led to inequality, exploitation, and deep dissatisfaction.
The flaw seems baked in from the beginning, this disconnect with the realities of human behavior. History looks like this cycle of trying logical systems that then fracture against messy human reality.
It does paint that picture. Fear, ambition, power, struggles constantly undermining the neat theories. And that sets up the really big question the book wants you, the listener, to consider as we move forward.
Which is?
Well, if history shows these models, even our current ones, keep breaking into the strain of their own promises, if they consistently fail to handle human complexity, shouldn't we perhaps try to build something different, something designed to acknowledge and maybe even adapt to that complexity instead of pretending it doesn't exist?
Like the Unitarism the book proposes later on.
Exactly. Is it time to stop recycling variations on old themes that seem destined to fail in the same ways? And maybe, just maybe, try something genuinely new?
That's definitely a provocative thought to end on. A challenge, really. Thank you for walking us through that historical trajectory.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us for this deep dive into the origins of economy. We hope it gave you some critical context for thinking about the systems we live in today.